Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's wonderful to see so many guests from around the world. I'm delighted to welcome you to the third lecture in our Spring 2021 Elizabeth Allen Art and Design History Lecture Series at Northern Illinois University. This series is made possible through the generosity of NIU School of Art and Design alumna Beth Plotnick. Today it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Priscilla Farias, professor in the School of Architecture and Urbanism at the University of Sao Paulo in São Paulo, Brazil, and coordinator of the Visual Design Research Lab there. Dr. Farias is a designer and design historian who has studied typography in many contexts, including Brazilian film and music, especially the São Paulo punk music scene of the 1980s. She has published and presented her work widely in English and Portuguese in international design and design history journals and professional organizations, including the International Conference on Design History and Design Studies, the UK-based Design History Society, and the Journal of Design History, where she also serves as a member of the editorial board. Most recently, she has been researching and cataloging the history of early Brazilian letterpress shops. In her talk today, Dr. Farias will discuss how typography and lettering are important elements in the configuration of public and private environments and documents, influencing the way we interact with all kinds of information and with each other, and with other designed artifacts. She argues for the relevance of typography to design heritage and graphic memory studies, including examples of her research on Brazilian print culture and public lettering. So please join me in welcoming my colleague, Priscilla Farias. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone to please mute your microphones, but to feel free to type your questions or comments into the chat throughout the lecture. When Priscilla concludes her talk, I will read as many of your questions as time permits and invite her to respond to them.
Okay,
Yes.
So thank you, Rebecca, so much for inviting me, and thank you all of you for coming, for joining us today. So I will be talking, as Rebecca told you, about typography, memory, and heritage from a Brazilian perspective. This first slide shows a catastrophic event that happened in São Paulo, downtown, in May 2018. A 24-story building caught fire and collapsed in the city center. But the collapse, as you can see, also revealed a now very rare hand-painted ad for a traditional Brazilian stout beer, most probably painted in the late 1950s. 4 months later, however, another tragic event happened in September 2008. The blank facade containing the ad was completely covered in green paint, as you can see it going on here. The action was commissioned by the building residents who, at least in part, believed to be following the regulations established by Cidade Limpa, the current legislation for São Paulo city urban landscape. This regrettable sequence of events, 2 catastrophes in 4 months, I believe it tells a lot about the poor conditions of Brazilian built environment preservation on one side, and also the absolute lack of any kind of public policy able to safeguard typography and lettering as part of the country's collective memory and cultural heritage. Before I go on, just a few words about the terms typography and lettering that I'll be using in this presentation. So in the title I use, In the title, I use the term typography in a wide sense, encompassing the whole set of practices and processes involved in the creation and the use of visible signs related to orthographic and para-orthographic elements of verbal language, that is, letters, numbers, punctuation marks, diacritics, etc. In order to be more precise, however, I will also use the term lettering to refer to manual processes for obtaining those characters, such as the colorful letter S painted on the right, and typography in a more specific and literal sense for mechanical and automatic processes where the shape of those characters and the metrical relation between them are determined in advance, such as in the letterpress printed red letters that we see on the left. Typography and lettering are important elements in the configuration of public and private environments and documents. Because they are everywhere, they influence the way we interact with all kinds of information with each other and with other designed artifacts. They indicate the do's and don'ts. They help us to remember and to be remembered. They register official data and dissent. They also are an important part of our visual and material culture. And this is why in this presentation, I should argue for the relevance of typography and lettering to design heritage and graphic memory. I will do so by showing you some examples of my research on Brazilian print culture and public lettering. Typography is something essentially visual if you consider the final outcome of the typographic process. A surface with visible marks that we can decode if we are familiar with the writing system used. But there is more, however, to typography than letter forms in a page. While the importance of printed books as cultural heritage is widely acknowledged, the same is not the case for printed ephemera, such as type specimens, or for the tools and machinery needed for printing, such as the wood type that we see here. As with other industrial resources, the value of such assets as cultural heritage has not always been recognized, in particular in Brazil. The situation has led of assets that will be crucial for a better understanding of the history of designed typographic artifacts and their use, and for evaluating the relevance of its cultural legacy. Typographic processes are by definition mechanical, multidimensional, and unavoidably material and industrial. They involve a number of phases going from the conception of characters and typefaces or type design to type production, typecasting or founding, composition or typesetting, and printing, proper letterpress, lithographic reproduction, digital display, etc. Typography is, of course, graphic or visual in some of those phases, but it is important to remember that it is also material and industrial in others. The ornaments and spaces that we can see in this image and the letters we saw in the image before were designed, fabricated, and distributed somehow before being put to use for printing. So while libraries are the main locus of preservation for printed typographic artifacts, museums of print and of typography have been established in various parts of the world for gathering machinery and equipment needed for obtaining the prints. Museums of print and of typography typically are set up in formal printing shops, and the core of their collections are usually machinery, equipment, and outputs of those companies. The Typografia Pão de Santo Antônio Museum that we see in this photo is an example of that. In Brazil, it was established in 2005 in an early 20th century letterpress printing shop in Diamantina, Minas Gerais. Equipment needed for letterpress printing, such as metal and wood typefaces, type cases, printing and binding machines that you can see in this room, are the most common assets in such museums. Some of them we'll also have linotype, monotype machines and other kinds of machinery. But the preservation of type casting equipment and machinery, that means the equipment needed for producing type itself, is most rare. Just a few institutions hold collections of such kind of materials, and no institution in Brazil, as far as I know, holds this kind of equipment. Many of those museums also offer the possibility of putting part of their collection to use in letterpress printing workshops and similar activities. But of course, the continuous use of those pieces is a threat to their preservation. So there is always a question of how much to put to use and how to conserve as pieces of the museum. So producing copies of those pieces is also always something that comes to mind. Producing accurate copies of or facsimiles is a traditional way, as you might know, of preserving manuscripts and printed artifacts in general. And at the same time, replicating, reviving or renewing earlier typefaces are, in fact, traditional procedures in type design. Here we see a revival done by one of my students sometime, well, now a little more than 10 years ago, Laura Lotufo. She based her work on what is considered the first book ever printed in Brazil in 1747. That resulted in a digital typeface named Isidora, the feminine for Isidoro, which was the name of the printer of this book, and it is very close to the conception of a facsimile. As you can see here, a comparison of the book cover and a facsimilar book cover produced with her typeface. So type revival procedures, however, are not always meant to produce accurate replicas. And even when they do, the resulting items can only partially preserve the original shapes and metrical structure of the original type, but they cannot replicate the material and three-dimensional qualities of it. There are some efforts towards that as well, of course. Did I cut my screen? You can still see my screen? Yeah.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. I don't know what I did. I clicked on something and no. Oh no, I see. I see here. Okay, good. Now I see you. That's good, because then I can have a sense if I'm being too bored or too fast or whatever. Okay, good. So in the last decades, along with the popularization, no, I cannot see my screen now. Why is that? Oh, this is so boring. Oh, why? Oh, what did I do? Oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, I was trying to hide something, and I hid everything. So this.
You've only hidden it from yourself, because we can still see.
Yeah, but I this is so strange. How can I get back to seeing my video? This is really weird.
Just take your time. It'll pop back up again, I'm sure.
I don't know. I have to tap here in order to see what, because I don't know in which slide I'm on. This is the only problem.
So we see the kind of box of letter forms with a kind of blue cloth in the background.
But why can't I see that? That's really awkward. Well, this is very odd. Oh, let me see if I can. Oh, maybe here. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I found it. It was hidden from myself. No, I found it. Okay, so let's. Oh no, I have to go back. Okay. So in the last decades, so I was talking about replicating type somehow. replicated just the forms or replicating the three-dimensional qualities of it. In the last decades, with the popularization of 3D printing and a renewed interest for letterpress, different methods for the replication of movable type have been tested. And this involved experiments of cutting wood type with CNC routers, casting plastic resin type from metal type, and replicating type sets using Fab Lab, all kinds of Fab Lab resources. So here we can see experience for producing type using CNC routers and Brazilian wood, done by a team of Brazilian designers and researchers. That is an example of that. But so far, the experiments have shown that the methods that we have, or the machinery that we have so far, are not adequate for smaller typefaces, for smaller sizes of typefaces, or the reproduction of finer details. But what we see here are quite big letters, so they can be reproduced quite accurately, but smaller or more finer details are not. So safeguarding original typesets is therefore still imperative for the preservation of typographic material culture. The most relevant printed artifacts, some of the most relevant printed artifacts related to typography for type design history and design heritage concerns are type specimens, which are catalogs prepared by type founders, phototypesetting companies, and letterpress printers in order to exhibit their repertoires to potential clients. Here we see on the left a catalog by Henrique Rosa, type foundry established in Rio de Janeiro in the early 20th century, and a page from a type specimen produced by Imprensa Oficial, the São Paulo State official printing shop in the early 1930s. Systematic examination of type specimens can lead to a better understanding of typographic trends and tastes, and of the dissemination and circulation of typefaces. At the time of their production, however, type specimens are always a working artifact that would become obsolete as soon as a new catalog is issued, or as soon as the type founder or printer goes out of business. So they were actually very rarely preserved. And here in Brazil, of course, we have a really small number of catalogs of this kind available in public collections. So in Brazil, as in most parts of the world, I would say, I mean, outside Europe and especially Britain and the US, where there are collections like these. In other parts of the world, that there are no institutions. In most parts of the world, there are no institutions dedicated to collect and preserve this kind of material. And efforts for reconstructing early printers' typographic repertoires for systematic examination of their printed outputs have been put forward in recent years in different places, and in more particularly that I know in Mexico with Marina Garoni, and by myself and my research team in São Paulo, with the help of Catherine Dixon, who's here today too. So since 2011, my research team and I have been working on a digital platform called Typografia Paulistana, dedicated to São Paulo city printers and their typefaces. It automatically produces dynamic versions of what could have been those printers' type specimen pages. The platform contains data and information about the first 100 years of printing in São Paulo, the typefaces that circulated, letterpress printing shops that use them, and the people who work it for these companies. Most of the work that we do starts with mining characters from printed artifacts, because type specimens are so rare. We mostly do that by examining commercial almanacs and pages ads in newspapers and magazines where there is more a profusion of typefaces are to be found. So typefaces are identified, images of typographic characters, and also ornaments and vignettes are carefully separated, named, and then uploaded and tagged with letter form descriptions. The result are pages such as these, which are similar to pages of a type specimen with information on the printed artifacts where those letters were found and the companies that used them for printing. Around 200 typefaces and 100 sets of ornaments and vignettes used by São Paulo City letterpress printers have already been cataloged by us. And it's an ongoing research, so every day you might find some news in this website. The website has also pages with information about the companies and the people that we add and expand from time to time. And other features such as this map connected with a timeline where we can see within a certain time frame that we can choose by sliding those red dots, where those companies which are letterpress, printing shops, type foundries and distributors, and other businesses such as engravers were located in São Paulo City. So talking about letters and cities, that comes to the second part of this talk, which is about lettering in the context of memory and heritage. So letters and numbers in the public space contribute to the texture of the cities and to a sense of place. They are numerous, but also constantly on the verge of disappearing. Most of them are not meant to be perennial or still. They may announce products or services that will only last for a couple of hours or may lay on the surface of moving bodies. As the struggle for control of the urban environment is constant, typography and lettering in this context have always been in continuous threat of being erased by new policies. This could be something as trivial as removing undesired inscriptions, such as this one in this column that we see in the photo, or as tragic as demolishing a monument or a building that contains relevant lettering. The most common threat to lettering in the public environment, however, is neglect. This is something that also affects inscriptions planned for permanence, in particularly those that are subtle in terms of scale or impact. This is the case of architectonic epigraphs, signatures of architects and builders found in the facades of some buildings. Small inscriptions such as these might be overlooked during renovations, damaged by urban policy updates, or simply decay due to aggressive environmental conditions. This inscription by Christopher and company that we see here, this is the same inscription in a round of a few years. It has been broken down, as you can see, and well, not really rearranged. It looks like the person who rearranged it, the stone didn't realize there was some inscription there, or didn't take care about that, and then it was painted over, and now it has completely disappeared. So laws and regulations that limit the presence and the dimensions of commercial messages in the public space are usually acclaimed by architects and urban planners. Such policies tend to result, in fact, in less visually charged urban environments, promoting a better appreciation of buildings and cityscapes. This is, however, not without some controversy if considered from the point of view of lettering as collective memory and design heritage. In São Paulo, the so-called Clean City Law banned all kinds of advertising in the streets, except for shop signs in limited number and standardized sizes. As well, received international design prizes, even won some of those prizes. But the enforcement of the law, however, compelled practically all shop owners to remove signs and renovate their fascias without any previous assessment of eventual heritage value of historical businesses. The only examples of historical commercial lettering that survived were, like in this photo, those carved in stone or molded in stucco in the facades of the buildings, such as this. Another threat to lettering as part of collective memory and design heritage is the eventual disappearance of people who master original lettering styles. The tendency for modernization and the demand for quicker and cheaper solutions provided by digital technologies has been putting out of work sign painters in many parts of the world and diminishing the diversity and distinctiveness of local lettering traditions. Letras que Flutuam, floating letters, is an exemplary initiative for registering and safeguarding this kind of knowledge. The project focuses on Amazon River Delta sign painters known as abridores. Some of them seen here in action in an exhibition in São Paulo. The initiative, coordinated by designer Fernanda Martins, won a number of important prizes, encouraging her to lead a proposal for the official recognition of abridores de letras work as intangible heritage. And here we can see some of those letters on boats, actually, near Ver-o-Peso market in Belém. The Brazilian Historical and Artistic Heritage Institute, IFAM, has 4 registry books, or livros do tombo. They all were established in 1937, and they are currently used for registering tangible heritage assets. They are the book of archaeological, historical, fine arts, and applied arts assets. The Book of Applied Arts, described by IFAM as gathering information on relevant pieces of decorative arts, design, graphic arts, and furniture, contains, however, only 4 entries. 4. One for ceramic jars, 2 for religious images, and another for a bridge. Against over 200 entries in the archaeological heritage book, more than 700 in the historical book, and over 800 in the fine arts book. The only example of typography, and there is no typography or lettering in IFAM at all. The only example of typography or lettering so far protected as part of Brazilian heritage, as far as I was able to ascertain, because besides IFAM, we have a lot of state and municipal organs that deal with heritage. So it was Profeta Gentileza panels that you can see here in the pillars of a viaduct in Rio de Janeiro. They were listed by Rio de Janeiro heritage organs in 2000. Gentileza letterings, however, that you can see, they are those very peculiar letters in the mid zone of the pillars. They still have to compete with graffiti and even with ads painted in the same pillars. An innovation was implemented in the towards heritage by Heritage of Humanity Institute, in recent years, and it was the inauguration of books for registering traditional shops and bars as intangible heritage. A revision of the facades of those shops and bars, however, shows that many of them, established between the 19th to the mid-20th century, could hardly ever be considered authentic in terms of lettering. As you can, we have here two examples. Tabacaria Africana, established in 1846, certainly not using Helvética in their fascia, and Café and Bar Pavão Azul, which was established in 1957, and certainly not with this kind of lettering and illustration in their fascia. Lettering, there is part of buildings listed as tangible heritage, on the other hand, not only in Rio, but also in other parts of Brazil, tend to be, in general, more officially preserved. So letters and numbers in the public space may have been added to last, like the house numbers in the hands of this Native American that we see here in the left, or might be destined to fade in very quickly, such as the chalk inscription that we see on the right. Since 2006, I've been developing research on public lettering as part of an ongoing project that I call Paisagens Tipográficas, or Typographic Landscapes. I have recently put up this website to gather and share information on this line of research. Ana Gouveia, a researcher from Unicamp, who has worked with me for many years, and we devised a categorization for typographic elements in the public space that you can see here. So it includes architectonic typographic elements in the urban landscape, which are permanent inscriptions such as a building name or number, and they're usually designed and built at the same time as the building. They can be honorific, as we see the example that we see here in the right, which are inscriptions designed to honor historical characters or events or places, such as those found in most public monuments. They can be memorial, typography or lettering, as we see on the left here, which are funerary inscriptions found in restricted urban spaces, such as gravestones in churches and cemeteries. They can be registered lettering, trade inscriptions by public-private companies, such as telephone and sewage system providers, usually located in gratings and manholes, as we can see. They can be artistic lettering designed on commission, such as paintings and sculptures using letters and numbers or forms similar to that. They can be part of regulatory and information system for city traffic, such as roads and directional signs, but also inscriptions that say, well, there is a garage here, so you cannot park your car. They can be, well, commercial lettering. This might be probably is the most, the one that we found more frequently in the urban landscape, which is lettering found on temporary signs, such as those of shop fascias attached to a building after its construction, and in most cases replaced by other signs from time to time. Of course, we have also commercial lettering. There is architectonic, as I showed you. So this one tends to stay for longer. Or accidental, which we see here, an example on the right, unofficial, unauthorized inscriptions, such as graffiti and tags, usually not planned and inscribed without the permission of architects, construction companies, developers, and owners, which is an important difference in terms of how long they probably will be kept intact. In the first version of the categorization, this ended here, so we had 8 categories. But then Ana and we realized that beside those 8 categories, we had also, which are all about different kinds of inscriptions that remain fixed in one place, albeit temporarily. And well, the last ones are more temporary than the others, and that were consciously designed. Typographic landscapes also included things like mobile inscriptions, which are lettering found in moving bodies, such as people, cars, boats, buses, lettering on dynamic supports which will be fixed, which might be fixed or moving, such as a LED panel on a bus, for instance, or involuntary typography, which is the name that we gave to those urban landscape elements or parts of urban of public environment, such as is seen from my own window here, that look like letters despite not having been designed to look like a letter. This piece of the sky looks like letter P, or so I thought when I took this photo. So, but Anna and I, we were particularly interested in a subcategory of architectonic typographic elements, which we named Architectonic Epigraphs, and we see a couple of them here. Along with other researchers and students, we studied their presence in São Paulo city center, and we photographed, mapped all of them, compiling a full inventory of São Paulo city architectonic epigraphs. From photos and rubbing, we derived vector illustrations that allow us to understand the letter forms in more detail and compare them. We also produced three-dimensional replicas of some of those inscriptions, allowing us to better evaluate their volumetric properties. And all those results were gathered in a website in Flash. So unfortunately, the website is not available anymore. This is very sad. We of course we have all the images and all the materials, so we eventually will put up another website. For the time being, some of this information can still be found in the São Paulo tab of this Typescapes website, along with other research results. So I hope, I'm sorry that it took longer than I planned here, but I hope to have been able to raise your awareness towards the relevance of typography and lettering for collective memory and cultural heritage. Although the examples I showed here are, of course, all from Brazil, similar situations can be found in other parts of the world, and I know that. In what regards heritage policies, the main concerns of Brazilian policymakers so far have been towards archaeological, architectural, and artistic assets, failing to register designed artifacts as part of applied arts heritage. The initiative of registering historically relevant businesses as intangible heritage, as it happened in Rio, has proven not to be enough for preserving the typographic elements related to them. The initiative of claiming intangible heritage status to the work of Amazonian abridores de letra is of course laudable, but even if successful, it will not be enough to safeguard Brazilian typography and lettering culture, because it's, of course, it's a very peculiar case, an important but very peculiar case. And what the situation we have so far is that not many old shop fascia lettering survived. Most of letterpress printing shops already discarded or destroyed their assets, and the existence of typecasting equipment and machinery is completely uncertain. The very boats painted by abridores de letra are being repainted every day, not always with the same care and mastery. During the 20th century, ideas of modernization and of good design have been established in Brazil before some kind of awareness towards the importance of safeguarding typographic heritage could emerge, giving almost no chance for local lettering and letterers to prove their relevance. So I feel, therefore, that urgent action is needed, and my motto is, let's save some letters today. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Priscilla.
Thank you.
For that beautiful, inspiring, moving presentation. Really wonderful illustrations. If you do have questions and would like to type them into the chat, that's a great way to do it. Or I think you can probably use a hand raising emoji, or you could just try turning your microphone off and jumping in if you wanted to do it that way. But maybe just to give people a chance to gather their thoughts, I'll start with a question of my own, which is, well, I guess it's more like an observation and a question. So I'm just struck by the wide diversity of different kinds of letter forms that you're exploring, the printed type specimens, as well as the hand painted letters, as well as the kind of monumental or architectural lettering in the cityscape, and the more ephemeral kind of graffiti. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about your project is sort of locating on the city map the location of those early print businesses and shops. And I wondered if in your research you had actually seen any kind of correlation between the location of those shops and the type of lettering that you find in the cityscape. Maybe too much time has gone by. It's very different
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, this is a really nice question, Rebecca. Thank you. Yeah, because well, actually, there is one student, and I think he's here. He's a PhD student, Fabio. He's trying to look exactly at this situation that you described it. Because of course, in the 19th century, we don't have that much photographic registering of the city landscape to compare with printing, but in the early 20th century we do. So he's looking at printers, São Paulo printers in the first 30 years, so from 90 to 1930s, and he's comparing the way they write their names, or they present themselves in printed artifacts such as labels or books, or well, every kind of printed artifact, and the shop fascias. Of course, it's very hard to get the photographs of this photo of the letterpress shop fascias, but he's looking at a large number of images. So what we are doing now, well, he's looking specifically at the shop fascias and trying to compare with the repertoire that we already were able to gather in the Typography Paulistana website. And we have also other two students who are actually architecture students who are looking at other old photos from the same area, but looking at lettering that was used for advertising wherever in the public space. And they just started their research like 6 months ago, and they should end this research by comparing whatever they found with what we have in this big catalog that we are setting up in the Typography for Palestine website. So,
it's so interesting.
Well, I cannot answer that precisely,
Yeah.
but we're trying to understand that situation, which is very important, of course.
Oh, thank you. It's so interesting. It looks like we do have a number of questions here. Now, I'm just going to kind of scroll back here a little bit. So Lucas asks, what opportunities currently exist in the area of creating typographic fonts?
Well, there is a lot of opportunities. It's since the advent of digital technologies, anyone with a computer and the right software can produce new fonts, just like we can produce new music or new poetry or paintings or whatever. Of course, producing typefaces that will be commercially viable, that will eventually be used by a large number of people, and everything is more difficult, because then, well, of course, you should have to, well, we should try to address some need of the society, either because someone hired you to custom design a typeface for their company, something that happens, or if you are just designing whatever you think is important for your own use, then you can give a try. And of course there are many ways to distribute typefaces today. Also, we have a big number of, we have my phones, Google phones, and of course larger typeface and font companies that they're always looking for new materials. So there is a lot of options, and the question is how many of those fonts will actually be used or will become successful in the sense of being used by a lot of people.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some of our students here at NIU might be curious to know what your students do in Brazil, because we have a big program called Visual Communication, and many of the students are learning to do typography and graphic design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can give you, actually, I will put, just to give you an idea, I will put here in the chat the link for another website. Is a website for my class, type design class. So here you find, well, you probably go directly to one of the galleries, but there is a gallery, well, there is more than one gallery at this point, where we showcase the results of what they are doing. I mean, they are working, well, before the pandemics. This was a class where we started by working in some quicker exercise, like designing typefaces from the students' handwriting, or from I also had an exercise that you can see some examples there. There are revivals of typefaces that are found in our letterpress printing shop. So we have, well, the physical type, and transforming this physical type in typefaces. This was a quick exercise, and then a second, which is really a project that they can propose whatever. I mean, they can propose to go on and continue one of those exercises, or try something completely different. So if you go through this website, you will probably see that, well, there is a lot of ideas going on. I mean, some more successful maybe than others, but I guess the whole picture is, well, I mean, it depends on, on the creativity, and of course we also try to make the typefaces as good, technically as good as possible, so that they can be used at least by their own students and their colleagues, and to share them somehow.
That's great. I didn't have this idea until just now, but I see my colleague, Professor Olagiza here, and who says she's going to get in touch with you. But it might be nice to do a kind of a little exchange, at least exchange, because I think we have a similar website, don't we, with the student work, and then they could see each other's projects.
Oh, that will be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we do, and I am impressed with your research. And I just typed like a quick message. I work on very, very similar things. I'm Polish originally, so I have a lot of research done in Poland, but also when I travel, I kind of try to capture every single typography that I see that is part of this heritage that you are talking about. So I'll be absolutely happy to be in touch with you. And thank you, Rebecca, for making it happen.
Yeah, no, it's exciting.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of comments here, just basically saying wonderful, beautiful. I loved this. I loved that. So we'll be sure to copy the chat out and send it to
Yeah.
you. But we do have a couple other questions. Matthew asks, "What?" Oh, this is an interesting question. What, in your opinion, is the most important typeface to the history of Brazil?
Oh. Wow, the most important typeface in the history, the most important Brazilian typeface. Wow, that's hard to answer that because I'm part of that history. I don't know. Maybe someone else should say that. I don't know. I'm part of that. It's really it's an awkward situation. Yeah.
Maybe
I'm part of one of the first generations of people who actually produced typefaces because, well, this is a very recent story. We must say, well, of course, I have more than one student like researching on what would have been, because of course we imagine that, well, the history of printing with movable type in Brazil, as you can see, is not very large. It starts in the early 19th century only. But still, I mean, it's more than 100. It's almost 200 years now. So someone must have tried to produce typefaces, physical typefaces, at some point. We believe, but we were not able to locate that so far because every time we do those research and even in Typografia Paulistana, something that of course we are collecting wherever typefaces they were using, and eventually we try to match with typefaces that we find in foreign catalogs, because we know most of those printers, they were of German or Italian descent. Most of them, they were German or Italian. This is and of course there were a few Portuguese or Spanish descent, whatever. So whenever we compare, we always find something similar in European or North American catalog. So we were not so far being able to ascertain, but I don't know, maybe something that is not in a catalog, something, I don't know, wood type, for instance, is another possibility. So we were not able to locate that. And we know about people who were producing typefaces in the previous to the computer era for Mecanorma or Letraset for transferring characters, for instance. But they were very peculiar and like one-time trials by people like Eduardo Bastigalupo and I don't know, Hans Donner, who's very famous for his The Identity of Rede Globo, which is a big television company here in Brazil. So we get to have a type design scene very recently when we have digital tools. Then we have a first generation of people trying to make the typefaces, which I'm part of. So this is why I cannot, it's hard for me to say which is the most important, because I think also, oh well. And then of course then younger generations, and today I don't know, well, we have so many people doing so many interesting things. It's very hard to say. I don't know. I don't think I can answer that.
That's a very challenging question. Although I see that there's at least one response here in the chat. Joao writes, Brasileiro, I don't know if I'm reading that right, is a digital interpretation of a vernacular handwriting. But then he writes, pop culture not part of typographical history.
Yeah.
And then Mirella says gentileza.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, gentileza, gentileza. Well, and there is a number of typefaces based on gentileza's handwriting. I wrote a paper, not a paper really, but an article, an essay for a typography magazine about that. It is very unique, yeah. And but it's not. Well, he was not doing a typeface. He was someone who was painting letters. Of course, he had a way of painting that which is very peculiar and very I don't know, remarkable. So it inspired people to create typefaces, digital typefaces based on that. But then, of course, when you look at those different typefaces, then you see the challenge that it is to transform something that is lettering. Now, there is a very lively and changes a lot when it has to be transformed into typography. Then you can see really what is the difference between lettering and typography.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Matthew, I remember he mentioned this earlier in the lecture too, that some of those early type specimens that you were showing us reminded him of Caslon.
Mm.
So yeah, I think you describe the kind of European context that a lot of the Brazilian print shops you were researching absorbed as well.
Mm. Well, I don't know, Caslon. Well, maybe. Of course. Well, if you look at the catalog of Typografia Paulistana, the repertoire we are gathering, most of the typefaces are actually title typefaces, are the big typefaces, because they are easier for. I work a lot with undergraduate students that do this kind of mining job that I was telling you, and of course, it is much easier to identify and to treat images of letters that are bigger and they are more peculiar than text letters. So very few of them work really with text. And I think we have I don't know, maybe we have something like three or four, maybe five typefaces which are. They look like Caslon maybe in the sense that they are some of them, I don't know. I don't think it's the majority really. It's just the ones that were already mined and collected. They look like old style text serif typefaces. But of course, if you look at the type that was used by later 19th century printers for text, they are mostly modern serif typefaces. So typefaces that will look more like Bodoni or something like that, or Didot. Sometimes also more condensed than the original Bodoni and Didot, but in that style, which is more contrasted. It has more thin serifs. Well, it's a little different than, I think, what Matthew is referring to is the traditional Caslon family, right?
Yeah.
With more triangular serifs, bracketed serifs, and so on, I suppose.
I have another question here about a particular typeface from Michelle, who asks if you're familiar with Richard Mays's Helvetica. I'm not. The font was created to honor sign painters in Latin American culture.
Helvetica? No, I don't know. Yeah, looks fun. I will try. I will look at it.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll look at that. We'll check it out. Yeah. So Tao writes, it really gets students who are used to only thinking about type in digital forms to thinking about their 3D impacts on the world. Yeah, I agree that it really gave us a lot to think about. I think seeing these different examples that you showed us. And Mirella had a really good point here too, which is that the collection that you were showing us, the Typografia Paulistana, really will allow these to live on in digital media or written on stone. So it's a wonderful service, I think, that you're doing with this research, collecting these kind of fragments of the past. Maybe if I could ask you one other question related to that, I wonder, so I'm interested in this idea of intangible cultural heritage. And I wonder if you could just sort of explain what that is and why you think it's significant, intangible cultural heritage.
Yeah, sure. Well, the concept of intangible cultural heritage is, well, it's something new, and that has to do with the idea that, well, whatever is usually listed as heritage has been traditionally physical things, monuments, places, buildings, or ruins, or paintings, whatever, books, or I don't know. And that the processes done by people in order to produce those things, or other things like the ways of preparing food, or the ways of sewing, or the ways of doing whatever it is that we do, and that allows us to produce culture. In a sense, there is not the end product is not a physical product. Or eventually, if it is, well, like for letter paint, sign painters, for instance, they do produce something that is physical in the end, but the processes they use to do that, the way they, I don't know, they select paint, or they devise how to design the letters, what colors to use, how they mix the colors, and all of those things that are not physical but are part of this culture were not listed. So the idea, well, for the general idea, of an intangible heritage is that, and more specifically, if we look at Brazilian legislation, it is rather new, and it includes, I think, things like this. I mean, Fernanda is now trying, well, she knows that it is possible, well, to claim that the way the abridores de letra paint their those letters could be considered something like intangible heritage, but that of course depends on the fact that the community of people who does that, the own abridores de letra, must be part of that claim. It is not enough that someone like myself, say an academic, say, oh, this is very important, now let's give this heritage value, but it is because it is conceived as a collective idea. It must be proposed by a collective of people, some society, I don't know, specific groups of people. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you everybody for typing these wonderful links into the chat. I'm going to see if I can somehow, well, we'll have the recording, and so maybe there's a way I can communicate with all of you and send some of these links, including the link that I think someone posted here a minute ago. Yeah, Catherine posted to Priscilla's some of your work too. So for sure, we'll share all of that that out. It was really, it was so fun to see everybody, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. Are there any more questions, last questions that people want to ask? I know it's late for some of you. If not, then please join me. I don't know, applause emojis or something to thank Dr. Farias for her talk today. I think it was really inspiring. We all have a lot to think about. Wonderful images. So we'll have to have you back again.
Yeah, it was great, Rebecca, and it was great to see you all. So many people that I don't see for a long time. Isabella Perrota, I see here. I see that Ana Uch from the Museu Pão de Santo Antônio was here also. It's really great to see you all, to be here. And for those that I didn't know, there are new friends. I do hope we can keep in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be the start of a collaboration.
Yeah, it will be great. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Great to see you all. Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you.